Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. It's Sketch Monkey here. Today we're having a look at the brand new 2023 Ford Escape, and this one is the ST line in a very specific color. We're going to talk more about that in just a minute. So what we're going to do in this video is, we're going to talk about this design because I think this is a handsome looking small crossover SUV. It's pretty, I almost say anonymous when it comes to the design. And we're also going to talk about these very funny exhaust pipes when we talk about the rear end. And then, of course, the interior, which I think is beautiful. Last but not least, we are going to take this for a drive. But first of all, let's talk about some of the spec and tech, and let's see what's hiding under this hood. So under the hood of the 2023 Ford Escape ST line, we do have, in this case, we do have the 2-liter EcoBoost 4-cylinder, putting out 250 horsepower and 280 pound-feet of torque, connected to an 8-speed automatic transmission. 0 to 60 is done in 6.9 seconds, which is not that bad. And fuel economy comes in at 23 city, 31 highway, and the price for this, as this one is spec'd, is $42,655. And some of the options include this Cinnabar red exterior color. So it almost looks brown or almost black when it's overcast right now, but when the sun hits it, you can see that it has some almost brown cinnamon feel to the color. And you also have the 19-inch wheels, which is an option, $200 option. And last but not least, you have the technology package for $2,000, which is something that I would probably not bother with because it gives you this head-up display, which I'm not a huge fan of. You can see it slightly right there. We're going to talk more about that when we look at the interior. But let's jump into the design, because there are a couple of things in the front end that I would like to redesign in this specific car. And those are some details specifically when it comes to the headlights. So let's close this up and let's have a look at the design. Starting with the front end of the new Ford Escape, you can see that we have the trend of the last 5 years in this car, and that is a light bar in the middle. I do think it looks very cool in this case. It looks pretty good, but I'm not sure if it suits a Ford to have this type of styling, because everybody puts light bars in the front end, and we do have that here right now as well. And then we have these headlights. So the thing about these headlights, you can see how they stick up so far into the side of the fender. So what I want to do is just redesign this section just a little bit to have it be a little more structured in this area and not stick out so far into the side of the vehicle. We also have this orange or amber position light right here in the side. Overall, the headlights, I do think they look good from this angle straight ahead with the LEDs, full LED headlights. As you can see, looking beautiful. And then you have a pretty strong brand identity, I would say, with these two lines. Maybe not very Ford specific, but these in combination with this light bar, it's either a Ford Escape or a Volkswagen Golf GTI. Now, coming up to the hood design, it's very fluid and very smooth. We have two clean lines right here in the middle, and then you have this A-pillar line coming down from the A-pillar going in. Doesn't really have any connection right here in the front end because it fades right before it meets it. But this line have a connection to the very corner part of this area in the front. And the grille, as you can see, is completely open and functional, both up top with the big Ford badge right here, and you have the front mounted camera installed right underneath it, and this is all open and all open in the bottom section. However, the sides, this is also an option to have the fog lights here, and I'm thankful that we do have those here, because otherwise this would just be a full plastic piece that doesn't have any sort of functionality to it. So adding a fog light in there with a bit of chrome trim that I'm not sure why they added on the ST line to have this piece of chrome, which is the only chrome basically in the entire front end except for the logo right there. So I would much rather have this be in black. I do like the housing for the entire front end. Everything seems to have a nice position to it, and everything seems to have a bit of, a chamfer for the key elements. For example, this chamfer right here is sort of a chamfer, and then it goes into almost a zigzag shape in this area where it connects to this corner grille. And then you have the same housing styling for this side piece right here with the fog light. And you also have a couple of lines going down here at the bottom, creating overall, as I said, it feels like a pretty anonymous car to me, but it's still a good looking car. They played it a little safe, Ford, with this design, and I totally get that because it is a big seller. They don't want to do anything crazy with this design. Now, coming around to the side view of the 2023 Ford Escape ST line. And unfortunately, the sun is not out, so it looks pretty dark right now, and specifically with the optional $200 wheels. But for $200, you do get the 19-inch, which these are, with the 255 tires, instead of having them be 17-inch. And I would definitely just pay $200 extra to have these type of wheels. Even though they are black, they still just fill out the wheel houses a lot better than the 17-inch wheels. And then you also have this small little ST badge right here on the fender, embossed. Looking pretty cool. It's a little bit too small for me. I would like to have it a little bigger, and also have some sort of housing to it, so it feels like it's part of the design and not just something that's been stuck onto the side of the car. And now, this being the ST line, yes, we do have blacked out trim pieces going all around it, looking so much better than if that were to be in chrome. You also have the door handles now being in body color, looking fantastic. Just brings up the class of this design. You do have sort of a shoulder line right there. It's not very strong in the front end. You can see how it fades from this area where it's pretty much non-existent, and the further back we go, the stronger this shoulder becomes until it reaches, yes, the corner off the taillight right here. Very nicely done. You also have this lower section right here. Pretty aggressive styling compared to the rest of the volumes of the body, to have this be stick out in such a sharp way like we have right here. But it does look good, and it also, as you know, removes some of the volume or the height of the overall car. Now, coming around to the rear end of the 2023 Escape, and this is probably my favorite view of this car because it reminds me a little bit of the Maserati Grecale when you look at it from this view, which is not a bad thing at all. Up top, you do have a roof spoiler, pretty big, and you do have these lines in it, so you have some styling on top of the roof itself, and you also have the panoramic sunroof in this specific Escape, looking pretty nice up there. But this is pretty substantial, and it does house the brake light up here. However, as always, when we have a big spoiler like that up top, I do wish that this was hidden up top underneath here. Then you have the full LED taillights, looking nice and dynamic. Look at this. We have a thin line right here, and then it becomes thicker as we go around the corner. It's a beautiful design, a full LED. Even the indicator right here is LED, which is great in this price range. Further down, you do have the two exhaust pipes, and you also have this type of styling with this line cutting through here with these reflector lights. I'm glad they didn't put plastic here and instead added some reflector lights to make it a little bit more functional than just having some fake plastic in that section. And they also have the rear mounted camera located right here. So let's open this up. Let me show you the trunk space of the 2023 Escape. You do have plenty of space back here. You also have a couple of connections, for example, a 12-volt outlet right here, cigarette outlet, and that's pretty much it. Underneath here, you do have the spare tire and some electronics. As you can see, if you want to, as always, you can fold down the rear seats manually to make even more space right here in the back. And this is power assisted, which is also a very cool feature to have in this price range. So we talked about the exterior of the new 2023 Ford Escape ST line. Now it's time to jump into the interior, which I am a huge fan of. There are just a couple of things here that I would personally like to change. We're gonna talk more about those in just a second. So jumping in here, it's a beautiful place, very cozy place to be in. I like that everything is very dark, and you also have a digital gauge cluster, as you can see, saying Escape right there. And if we turn this on, look what happens up top here. So this is the start button down here, turning it on, and up comes the head-up display plastic visor, or whatever you want to call that. And this is something that I am not a huge fan of. I don't want to have this in my field of view when I'm driving all the time. I much rather just have nothing, no head-up display, because as you can see, the distance from the information that you read here to this distance here it's not long enough for me to justify having a head-up display in this case, since the gauge cluster itself is so beautifully integrated in this car. And I do love Ford's digital gauge clusters. They just look great. Having it like this, completely digital, with this pretty analog layout of the graphics. And you can go in here, you can modify the head-up display if you want to, and go into settings. You can play around with a bunch of different settings here for the vehicle and the phone navigation and so on, as you can see. So you do have a lot of customizations for this type of screen, and I think it's a fantastic idea. And it also changes graphics when you switch the different drive modes, which we're going to have a look at in a minute as well. Then you have this big piece right here in the center, and this is of course the infotainment screen, a 12.3-inch infotainment screen. We do have a nice housing, as I said, for the gauge cluster, but what I wish we had here is, as you know, all of these buttons, I want to have these be physical buttons right here or somewhere. So maybe down here even, it doesn't really matter. But I don't like to have everything, all the climate control settings, being part of the software itself. Even though this is a static bar, we do have the heated seats here. If you want to turn that on, you can do that by clicking this button right here. Pretty easy to do, but you can't feel your way to the correct buttons. And I think that's the main reason why I like to have physical buttons and dials for the climate control setting, is to just, when you're driving, you can just feel your way to what it is you're adjusting, instead of taking your eyes off the road and looking what it is you're pressing. So here you have the temperature. The graphics are beautiful. I don't mind the graphics at all. I think they're some of the best graphics when it comes to the climate control settings being all digital. You have the fan speed here as well. You have a bunch of different settings for the climate control information, as you can see down here. Pretty standard stuff. And if we go into the home button, we do have a big navigation screen. As you can see, you can load it up so it fits the entire width of the screen, which I love. But again, I would always probably just use Apple CarPlay for this. If we go into features, here you have the different drive modes that we talked about. You can change them here. And again, look at these graphics, just how beautifully done this is. If we go into normal, you have a city landscape right there. If we go into eco, it turns into this flower with these green balls in it or something. And then if we go into sport, it goes into, of course, we need some red color now. So everything switches, the gauge cluster, and you also have this mechanical piece, or you can go into slippery, and that gives you some snow and some wet features for when you're driving when it's slippery out. Again, very beautifully done with all these features. And as you can see, as we go through these drive modes, the gauge cluster changes colors as well. So I love the graphics that Ford are doing right now in their software, even though I wish all of these buttons were physical. Further down, we do have the hazard button right there. We do have some nice looking vents. I like how this line from the infotainment screen continues into this exact line. So it feels like the infotainment screen has some sort of connection, even though it just sits here up top like an iPad on the dash, but it still has some line flow cutting into the rest of the graphics, which is a nice consideration by Ford to include that. Further down, we do have a start button, as we talked about. We do have the driver assistance settings with this button, the parking sensors, the automatic shut off for the engine, which I always, as you know, turn that stuff off all the time. You have the vent control settings and the drive modes. And last but not least, let's pop up the cameras. You do have a 360 camera in this price range, which I think is fantastic. And of course, you do have the front mounted camera, or you do have the rear mounted camera as well. If we put this into reverse, it's going to pop up the rear view camera with the trajectory lines, looking pretty clean. And I do like how it takes up the entire field of view of this screen. Further down, you do have two USBs here, one USB-C, one USB, all backlit. And you also have a 12-volt cigarette outlet with the wireless charging being located right here. I do like this trim that we have. Instead of having just some boring plastic, we have this textured feel with these stripes in them, looking almost like a mix of plastic and wood, looking pretty nice, and again, just brings up the classiness of this vehicle. Then you have the drive modes here, of course, the gearbox for the drive modes: drive, neutral, reverse, and park. And you have the parking brake right here as well, and the auto hold. Then you have 2 cup holders here. Pretty standard stuff. This is what the key looks like. Also a pretty normal Ford key with the Ford logo at the back. Then you have the remote start, and you have the lock and unlock button, and you can open the trunk by clicking this 2 times, and the panic button at the very bottom. Now, looking at these trims for this interior, I do like the red stitching because this gives a more sporty feel, and this is a pretty soft armrest even though it is rather small. But underneath here you do have a plenty of storage, and this is one of my favorite features in the Ford Escape ST is this pen holder. So if you have a favorite big pen like I do, the big round stick pens, and if I feel like sketching, all I gotta do is just put my big pen right here and put a sketchbook in here. I'm all good to go. Now, looking at these seats, also fantastic looking seats. They do have some nice styling to them with these patterns in the center portion right here going into the backrest, and you still have the red stitching in the sides with some proper bolstering. These are of course power adjustable. The sides of the door also has some nice styling to them with these lines cutting in here going into the door handle itself. Otherwise a pretty normal looking door with a regular handle up top and this carbon fiber looking trim coming back like we have up top here on the dash as well. Moving on to the steering wheel, I do like, that's the thing, I like pretty much everything in this interior except for the climate control settings and the head-up display. Those are 2 things. I don't want the technology package, just delete that, and I also want physical buttons, but everything else in here is absolutely fantastically laid out, and I do like the feel that we have of everything. This is a very fat steering wheel for a Ford Escape. I would definitely go with the ST trim just because we have so much more sportier vibe in the interior, and also the blacked out 19-inch wheels. It feels a little bit more upscale than I would expect. So on the left side here you have the cruise control settings and the voice commands, the volume for the radio, and on the right side you do have the customization for the screen itself, so you can go into whatever you want here and customize the screen however you like. On the left side of the steering wheel we do have an additional vent, and you also have the light settings right here on the side. Now, looking up top, we have a place to put your shades in, and then you of course have this massive, absolutely huge sunroof, which is also an extra and something that I would not really care about. But actually right now when it's cloudy outside, it's pretty nice to have some additional light coming in right here from the top. Now, with that said, we had a look at the front end of the Escape. Let's jump in to the back seats, and this I would say is a pretty comfortable driving position for me. So let's see if I can fit behind myself back here. So here we are, and I have plenty of space back here. Even if I sit with my legs straight, as you can see, I have decent leg room because we have this carved out portions of the rear seats, which helps a lot. I do sit a little higher than I do in the front end, but still plenty of headroom, no complaints here at all. As you can see, there's a lot of headroom, and I'm 6'1". In the middle here we do have some vents, and we also have a USB-C again and a USB. And if we fold down, let's see if we do have cup holders here. Yes, of course we do, even though they are pretty basic. Alrighty guys, setting off in the 2023 Ford Escape ST line. Let's start in normal. Maybe we'll soften out the suspension a little bit as we go over this gravel parking lot here in Red Rocks in Colorado. Look how beautiful it is, this view. So green, all of this will soon be covered in snow. The thing about Colorado weather that surprised me a lot is that there basically is no spring and there is no fall. It just goes from summer, right now it's 69 degrees out and it's October. I promise you, in November, we're gonna have a negative degrees and we're gonna have snow. It just happens like that. Same thing going from winter to summer. It's just very strange, the seasons here. And it also feels like everything is pushed back a couple of months than what I'm used to. So, talking about this ST line Escape here, have a look at the head-up display right in the field of view here. So it feels like it's a little bit in the way when you're looking at it. I don't like having an additional piece for it, that sticks up like that. I just want to have, if I'm gonna have a head-up display, I just want to have it be, you know, displayed onto the windshield and not just have an additional piece. But some people like it, I assume, and that's why people buy the technology package. I'm sure you get a few more things than that, not just a head-up display. I'm not sure if this panoramic roof is part of the technology package. I do believe it is, and that is a $2,000 option to have that package on your Escape ST line. I would just go with the wheels, and that's pretty much. I'm not sure if I would even. Maybe I would go with the 17-inch wheels, and then just switch them out, because as you know, I'm not a huge fan of black wheels. But to each their own. Everybody has a different taste, so that's a good thing. Let's put it into sport here as we're coming out to the main road in a minute. I really like this crossover SUV because it has pretty much everything that I personally look for, except for a few details in the interior, which we talked about already. But the good news is about this climate control is that everything is always static. So this bar down here never moves. It's always here on the screen. So at least you don't have to go into like press a climate button to get those buttons visible. They're always going to be at the very bottom of this display. But the gauge cluster, beautiful integration of the gauge cluster in my opinion, with a nice housing on it. We have a dual trim piece, so we have this inner piece, then you have the soft touch material up top. The ride is surprisingly chilled out as well, even though I have it in sport, and as you can see, this road is not the best road. It still swallows up pretty much every single imperfection in the road, even with the 19-inch wheels. I assume if you go for the 17-inch, it's going to be even more comfortable than that. So let's step on it. 250 horsepower. Let's go. It does have some punch in it for sure, and I do like that you can hear some whooshing from the turbos. It just adds to the overall driving experience. It feels pretty good to step on it, and 250 horsepower and 270 or 80 pound-feet of torque is, I believe, more than enough for this type of package. You can get it with a 1.5 liter 3-cylinder, but I would definitely go with this EcoBoost engine because it just, I feel like this has not too much power and not too little. It's just right in the middle where you want a car like this when it comes to the power delivery. It just feels like it's suited for this type of vehicle. And the exterior design of this car, as I said, a couple of things in the front end I like to change. For example, the weird situation with the headlights going up on the fenders. But other than that, it is a pretty anonymous looking design. It feels like this could be a Honda if you just remove the badge and change some features of this design. Or it can even be a Toyota if you do the same thing. And I think right now, in today's world where you have a lot of companies just experimenting with a bunch of different things when it comes to exterior design and also interior design, I think BMW's in the forefront when it comes to experimenting with designs. I think Ford just went a different route here with a different philosophy and just took it easy on the design, just made a beautiful but very, very safe looking design for the Ford Escape. This 8-speed automatic, I don't have any pedals for manual shifting, but having it in sport, it still keeps the revs relatively high, so you're always in that power band when you're stepping on the gas, and the handling feels tight as well for what it is. I mean, it's not a small low riding sports car, but it still feels very, very nice in the corners and fun to drive. These seats, they're sort of comfortable. They feel a little rough in the, a little firm in the backrest, but I'm not sure. I've tried to play around with the settings down here with the bolstering. I feel like maybe they are a little on the small side, even though I'm not a pretty big dude. I mean, I'm pretty normal sized, and they still feel to me a little bit too, maybe a little bit too small on the sides. and it's kind of hugging my ribs more than the sides of my body, if that makes sense. But in the corners, they definitely keep you in place, so there's no problems there. Overall, guys, the 2023 Ford Escape ST line, as this one is spec'd for about $43,000, honestly think it's a pretty cool alternative if you're into this market with small crossover SUVs, which I think pretty much 90% of people are. It has a nice design. It's pretty fun to drive, 250 horsepower as long as you go with the 4-cylinder and not the 3-cylinder. And it handles well on these twisty roads here. So overall, I give it maybe, out of a 10, maybe I'd say a 6.5 or 7 out of 10. And the reason for that is because I think they could have experimented a little bit more and not played it so safe with the exterior design. Even though it is a very good looking crossover, it's still a very safe option when it comes to this design. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.